House, the mailbox, there was a check from the United States Treasury. But I'll buy you an extra lunch for you tonight. You can only have one. Say local, program.
Is there a supplement? It's in the packet. Yeah. Yeah. I had it.
The March 2nd, 2026 Auburn City Council workshop will be called to order. There's a single item on the workshop tonight. It's the introduction of the FY27 budget. I'm going to spend a few minutes here to sort of talk about some background and process issues. I think this will certainly be helpful for the new councilors and for members of the public. So, sort of an introduction, I think it's important to understand that the budget reflects the policy choices and priorities of the City Council. The City Council should think of these choices in terms of programs and services, and not, as you'll see as we get into the process, necessarily of every single line item in the budget. The City Manager is provided a budget under the same guidance as the last couple of years, and we'll see the same thing from the superintendent as it goes through the school committee, and that is that it's presented basically in two parts. The first part reflects the expenditures and revenues that are necessary to providing the current programs and services that the city provides, and the second is a list of proposed, expanded, or new programs and services. Those, as you'll see, come from two sources. There's external requests, and basically, typically these are from like a nonprofit or some other entity. They make their requests through different means. They might send it to the city manager or myself or counselors, and those are included on the list as they are presented to the city. The other are internal requests, and these are typically requests that come through departments, and these have passed through a review by the city manager. So as those of you who have worked on budgets before understand that there's many good ideas and many expanded programs and services that the departments could provide, but each year, given the fiscal realities of where we might be, the city manager may or may not bring forth those requests that come through the internal budget preparation process or not. I think it's important to note too that the city manager's role is to amend the budget as we go through this process based on decisions made by the city council, right? So this isn't a situation where the city council just says to the city manager, gee, I see the gross number on the budget, I'd like to have a 5% cut, go away, come back and tell us what that would look like, right? Because that required the city manager and staff to make significant policy decisions regarding the prioritization of the services that will be provided by the city. So as we move through this, the city council should be looking at this in terms of expansion or contraction or elimination of various programs and services. The city manager and the staff will then take that guidance and they'll do the detailed work to come back to the city council and explain making that change will affect the budget in whatever way, positively, negatively, neutral. The city manager may, as he does that, and having discussions with staff, come back and present different alternatives that could be achieved, or perhaps some thoughts about prioritization internally, but ultimately those decisions are to be made by the city council. As we move through this, you'll see that the budget is quite an expansive document. I just want to set the expectation that we're not going to sit down with the budget book and go through this line by line and discuss every single line item. You know, we had a request by a counselor, a couple of years ago to do this. So, what that means is you open the budget book and let's say the city clerk's the first item, first department, the first line's postage. If we're going to go to that level, we're going to be here for many, many months talking about that. If you look at the budget book and you have particular questions about line items, or you have particular suggestions about line items, the best way to handle that is to set up a time to meet with the city manager and ask your detailed questions. Right? And you can do that in preparation for making your proposals or comments or thoughts known about the budget. But I just want to set the expectation that we're not planning on going through every single line item in the budget. I think Councilor Platts made mention of some items regarding the school budget at the last meeting, or maybe 2 meetings ago, but I think they're worth repeating. The council will be working in detail the city side of the budget. The superintendent is going to be bringing forth her proposal to the school committee. The school committee will work the school budget with the superintendent in detail. Ultimately, the school committee will adopt a budget. They will forward that to this body, and the city council's role is to approve or reject the gross number provided by the school committee. I would say it's good practice if the city council feels that they cannot accept the number provided by the school committee, that when we transmit that back to the school committee, we provide feedback and recommendations so that they have some understanding of what concerns the city council might have. But we won't be working, even at the program and service level, the council will not be working the school budget. So that's some background, I think, a little about process. So we're going to kick this process off tonight. I think the first discussion we're going to have is to talk about to get a sense of the council of what a target tax levy benchmark should be. And we'll talk about this in a few minutes in more detail, but it's very helpful to have some idea of what we're working towards, both for the council to understand how they're progressing in their work, and for the city manager and staff to be able to provide feedback in terms of dollars about what remains to be done to reach the benchmark that you set. The next item that we're going to have is a presentation by the city manager. A high-level presentation. The budget books will come later, but to talk about the budget in summary and the drivers associated with the budget and the issues that they've taken into consideration internally with staff in developing the budget. We'll then move on to a discussion of the new or expanded services. I think it's labeled as supplemental considerations in your packet. It's important to early on decide if the council wants to move any of those items into the budget for consideration. And you're not approving them at that stage, but it gives us a singular budget with bottom line numbers for departments, for program services, and a bottom line number for the budget to understand what the total impact would be. So we're going to work on trying to get through those tonight. We'll then have a series of budget workshops. The city manager has sent out to the council notification that we're planning on having budget workshops on the Monday nights, for which there's no council meeting. And we'll work through this, hopefully, to get into a schedule in April where the council will adopt the budget. There's a very important piece of the process for the council to understand. It says, pursuant to the charter, the council needs to adopt both the CIP and the city budget on or before June 30th. On July 1st, if the council has not adopted a budget, what the city manager is presenting as his proposed budget will automatically become the budget for the city. So while we have quite a bit of time before we get to that, this is a time-bound process. A little bit about scheduling. So we'll have the workshop tonight until 7. We'll move into the council meeting. We've purposely kept very little on the council agenda so that if we don't conclude the 3 items before us in the workshop, we'll reconvene the workshop after the council meeting. The intent is to work through all 3 of those items this evening. The council has these dates, but for the public, and they'll be able to see the schedule on the website as well. On March 9th, there's no council meeting, but there'll be a budget workshop. All the budget workshops are in the council chambers. Workshop on March 9th will start at 5:30 p.m. and scheduled to 8 p.m. There'll be a budget town hall on March 10th from 6 to 8 p.m. in the community room across the hall. These are similar to the budget town halls we had in the past. Members of the community often find it difficult to engage in the formalized budget process. There's no public input during the work sessions, and the council doesn't directly answer questions during public comment, and people are limited to 3 minutes. So the budget workshop's a great opportunity for members of the public to come in, ask questions, get clarification about the budget, and help them understand the budget process. So if they'd like to come forward when we have public hearing, they're more prepared. So the first one of those will be March 10th, 6 to 8 in the community room. There'll be another budget town hall on Saturday, March 14th from 3 to 5 p.m., and that will be at the Resource Center on Mill Street. There'll be a budget workshop preceding the City Council meeting on March 16th, 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. There'll be a budget workshop on Monday, March 23rd, 5:30 to 8 p.m. Also, another budget workshop scheduled on March 30th, 5:30 to 8 p.m. And then the last one that we have scheduled is prior to the council meeting on April 6th, 5:30 to 7 p.m. So I'll pause here for a moment and see if there's anything the council has for questions or thoughts at this point about sort of the background, where we're headed, and what the near-term scheduling is that we're expecting. Okay, great. So let's take up the first item then, which is trying to set a benchmark for or target for the tax levy. So, you know, as the council understands, especially those that have worked on budgets numerous times in the past, the task before the council is to really balance the services that residents need and want with their tolerance for paying property taxes. You know, councilors have heard me say this before, there's a never-ending list of good, valuable things that city government could provide but there is not the tolerance to pay property taxes for every program that might be beneficial. What people, people in the community, what it's really about for them is how big of a check am I writing when I send my property taxes in. So their property tax payments based on the property tax mill rate. We won't be directly addressing the mill rate because the mill rate's calculated by taking the total municipal budget amount that's going to be raised from property taxes, right? So the budget less non-property tax revenue like state revenue sharing or school aid. And that's going to be divided by the total assessed valuation of all taxable property in Auburn. The way this process works, we are not going to have the final information from the assessor till at least a month and probably 2 months after we've adopted a budget. So we're still trying to work in the context of how big of a check is somebody going to write for their property taxes, and the closest approximation to that is the tax levy. And again, that's the total expenditures less the non-tax revenue. So it's not exact, but it's the closest thing that the council will have before them to try to understand what the impact will be on the community from the decisions that they make. I mentioned a few minutes ago some of this, but this is useful as a benchmark because it allows the staff to calculate the differential in dollars between the proposed budget and the benchmark, right? So the city manager is going to propose a budget. We're going to understand what the potential increase is. The council may agree with that number or not, and if they don't, we'll have some conversation here in a minute to try to understand what people want as a target. That's not hard and fast. That may change as we go through our work and see how easy or difficult it might be to reach the benchmark. But during that process, if we have a benchmark, the city manager will be able to come back to you and say, okay, if this is the benchmark that you're shooting for, and this is a proposed budget, this is how much adjustment there needs to be in the budget in dollars, right? And that's very important because when you're looking at programs and services, the cost of those are expressed in dollars, help you understand what impact your actions will have. Again, this is a target or a benchmark. The council may or may not get to it. They may go further than the benchmark, but again, it gives us something to work towards. So I'll stop there and see if councilors have any thoughts based on the summary that was in your packet about a potential benchmark that they want to work towards. Councilor Platts.
Sure, I'll start it off. Well, I'm not going to answer your question directly because I think it's more nuanced than that, but I've got answers. The reason I can't answer it directly is because what I want is a tax levy that doesn't go above 4 or 5% increase. But I am very well aware that we've just added $6 million a year in debt service, or we will be adding $6 million a year in debt service with the public safety building. So I believe it will be unrealistic for us to hope to keep the tax levy under 4%. That said, to break it into the constituent parts of the budget, looking at our municipal services and budget, I'm staring at a 5.69% increase. And I understand that's no new services, no new headcount. Is that correct? It's as is, just with
it's current,
contracted increases,
it's
insurance.
Current.
Current.
So if I might, I understand where you're headed, which is to look at the various parts and set a target for each of those. I don't think we're anywhere near that in the conversation at this
Okay,
point.
all right, well then I'll say 5%.
That's fine.
Is that more helpful?
I think we'll get into the individual pieces and see how
Okay.
those affect this. But just big picture, taking into account there are substantial cost increases to provide the same level of programs and services where you are. So 5%?
I'll say that, again, just with the asterisks, that I believe that will be very difficult to achieve. My personal goal to achieve that will be to decrease the municipal services budget to under 4% increase. That's just my personal goal. I'm going to be pretty hard on the CIP. We don't need to get into the details now, but I'd love to see a budget that doesn't go over 5% increase. My fear is to do that, we're going to have to cut the heck out of services, which scares me.
So I think, you know, the observation, I think, is very pertinent to the discussion, which is we'll set a benchmark. As we start working the budget, we're going to see how easy or hard it is to get there and what types of policy decisions the city council is going to make to get there. But it is important, I think, to have something to work towards. Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand the process that you've explained, but in order for me to come up with my drop-dead number, I would like to find out, and I know it can be done, but it'll be hard, if we do nothing with the current budget the way it's proposed, what is the mill rate going to be? How much of a budget increase? Because I've heard on the street that we're looking at $3.50 to the mill rate, which I won't support. So I want to know exactly what I'm shooting for.
So I would say, again, there's no way to know that in this process, right? So if someone's speculating out in the community that they know what the mill rate adjustment's going to be, I would say that that's not possible. Just at a high level, after we adopt the budget, the assessor's office is going to have to, within substantial guidance of a process by the state, is going to have to determine the assessed value. So let's use the budget last year, right? So the council adopted a budget. It had a certain percentage increase as we looked at it. The mill rate, that percentage increase in the mill rate last year was somewhat lower than what we had been working on because there was no market rate adjustment across any of the property categories, and there was substantial new value in the city from new construction, from renovation. So we're not going to know what the mill rate, the final mill rate is until, as I said, at least a month, probably, unless we go right to the deadline, it's probably going to be a couple months after the budget's adopted before we're going to know that number. So I think, though, if I'm following your thoughts, the city, one way to look at this is to say, I want flat funding, right? If you, Councilor Gary, if you were to say, hey, I want to have flat funding, I don't want the tax levy to go up, I want to spend the same amount of money as last year, the city manager can come back and say, okay, if you want to have flat funding, same as last year, here's how much money you're going to have to cut out of the current programs and services because things are going to cost more this year than they did last year. So I think, again, we're looking for a benchmark to work towards on the tax levy. That's as close as we're going to get because we're not going to be able to calculate the mill rate until well after the budget's adopted. Any follow-up, Councilor Geary?
I still think that we can have a target number. We know how much of an increase this year's budget is proposed over what was last year. And given that we know that amount, it should be easy for those that are better at math than I am to come out how that allocates to how much of a raise in the taxes in order, or, I mean, there's got to be a way that we know close to what, maybe not exact, maybe we could figure it out and then be pleasantly surprised or get
So-
caught in the end.
So my suggestion would be, that's what we're doing, and that would be what the percentage is. So again, to calculate the mill rate, we need the assessed value information from the assessor. It's not even going to be available till well after the budget's adopted. I think, I'll just use the 5% that Councilor Platts brought forth. A close approximation, and that's about all you're going to get until we get all the final numbers in. If we were to say that the tax levy is going up 5%, in general terms, that's going to equate to a 5% increase. You can take the mill rate, multiply it by 1.05, and get an idea around what the mill rate would be. But we're not going to be able to, just like we couldn't last year or the year before, calculate the exact mill rate in the budget process.
And if I might just add, my understanding, the reason I understand what you're saying, Councilor Gary, I think one of the difficulties is we could increase the tax levy, but the mill rate could go down. Let's say we got 5,000 new citizens overnight. The mill rate would go down because we've added we've increased the assessed value. So it's tough to talk about mill rate. But to your point, when I say 5%, in my mind, I think the assessed value of the city will go up ever so slightly. So in my mind, a 5% tax levy is slightly less than a 5% increase on the tax bill. It's not science, it's not fact, it could be different, but given the historical nature of taxes, that's how I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking, I don't want someone's tax bill to go up over 5%, so that's why that number came out of my mouth.
Yeah, I think that's a really great, a good way to explain it. Councilor Cowan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too agree. The added complexity of the mill rate is that there's a revaluation that's in process right now, and so the types of properties and how that could impact. My recollection is we aimed for something like 5% last year, and it came in under that because of the value in the mill rate. So I think to that point, exactly to Councilor Platt's point, as much as I would love to see a 4 or 5% be our target, just doing quick math, if you assume that the reality is many of the things that are creating the biggest increases in this budget as it's currently proposed are things we have no control over changing. For example, 44% increase on our debt service, right? To your point, Councilor Platts, that's the reality, and the vast majority of that, about 80% of that, is to the public safety building. There's a 9% increase in county taxes. So I did quick math. If we were to ask City Manager Kroll to keep expenses for the municipal services at current costs, and that this is very quick math because there's other places we could have some impact on things. But just if we had said that's where we are going to focus, we'd come in at 70,000 as the revised budget. We essentially remove the $2,391,000 increase that's in City Manager Kroll's budget. That would reduce the total increase to 70 million over 64 million, which is a 9.9% increase. So I think four or five, again, as ideal as that is, I don't think it's realistic. I think what we instead could do is we could try to be looking at where we can keep things as flat as possible for certain things, knowing that if we're going to do that, we are cutting services, right? Because essentially what we asked the manager to put together is, what is the cost to keep everything the same? So we're talking people, we're talking FTEs, and so looking at those, it would be great. We need to do that. We need to do our due diligence. But so part of what I'm struggling with, and I look forward to conversations with my fellow counselors, is that the majority of voters voted for investing up to $45 million in a public safety building, and to try to offset other services in in the fact, because that's a big driver, and I'm not sure that's what people were really voting for. So that's something I'm struggling with, is should we really try to keep it as low as what we have in the past, at least the last 2 years? Because people voted to invest in something big. So I'm not sure that we need to aim for 4 or 5. Maybe it's something like 8 or 9, and we can see where we get. But that's kind of where I'm thinking, and I look forward to people's reactions to that thought.
Other counselors?
Can I make one more comment?
Sure.
I do want to say the reason I started by kind of splitting, debt service from operational budget, I think when we think about what the public is going to think about this, I think that CIP is different than the operational budget, right? We've been backed into the reality of the CIP. We can't deny this public safety building, but I do think we're going to have to be more diligent on the operations budget. And I also want to say publicly that even though it's not the city council's responsibility to look at the schools, the minutia of the school's budget, I am on the school committee. I do get to see that. And somewhere in my brain, I would like to see some level of parity between increases in operational budgets on the school side, irrespective of their debt service, which goes up and down, and increases in operational budgets on the city side. We don't have to do that, but I just want you guys to know that is something I'm going to be thinking about throughout this process.
Any other comments from the 4 counselors who haven't weighed in on this yet? Councilor Duval?
So I guess, I agree, I think with Councilor Cowan, just in general, I feel like a lot of this, the debt service is what the debt service is, and we have to pay for that, and that leaves us in an unenviable situation. So I think somewhere around 9% feels about, well, it doesn't feel good, but feels like a starting point. But I do look forward to the conversations to get a little more detail about what that means.
Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree that I support our residents when they voted to build a public safety building. I don't know if they realize the unintended consequences of having to bond. I know it says up to a certain amount of millions and then the debt service to pay it back. But given that it's such a big chunk that we're trying to do this year, any chance we could not bond as much for this year, spread out the payments into another year so that it'll be a little less harmful and we would be able to pick up some for the next year.
So a couple of comments on that. I think the city manager, I'm not sure if it will be in the presentation tonight. If it isn't, and it will be in the budget process here at some point, will review the financial analysis that was on the bond referendum. So there is no mystery about this. It was absolutely crystal clear what the expected impact on the mill rate would be, and I think, I'm sure the manager will go over in this in more detail, but the last numbers that I saw, what's in this budget for the new public safety building is very, very close to what the financial statement was on the referendum. So I don't think we can just excuse this and say people didn't know. It's in there with all the calculations with a bottom line number showing what the impact is. And, whether people read that or not, we can't control voters. But the council, when they put the referendum out, complied with the statutory guidance about the information to be provided on a bond referendum, and that was very clear. We can get into, I suppose, at a later time, but there's lots of constraints around how bonding takes place. I don't think there's a way to defer the bond. We've taken the bond pursuant to what the method it's allowable through the bond bank, and the city has to pay the principal and interest on the schedule related to the bond. So we couldn't say, well, let's not do it this year and let's throw it on year 21 so we don't have to do it this year. It doesn't work like that. You know, the bond schedule is a bond schedule, and I'm sure the finance director could provide us, when we get to the point in the discussion, the schedule and exactly how that works. Other thoughts, Councilor Walker or Councilor Butler or Councilor Randall? Councilor Randall?
I'm a little hesitant to throw a number out there. Being the first time that I'm on this panel, I don't want to be tied to a number yet, because I'm not comfortable enough saying I'm comfortable with a raise, raising it 6%, 9%, 10%. I understand the reality is that it's going to be close to 9%. I mean, if we're going to be realistic. However, I would love to see it be 5 or 6, but I don't want to be tied to those numbers.
Yeah, so just to be clear, no one's tying any of the counselors to this. This is just a working number. As we start into the budget, people then will get a real sense of what types of policy decisions need to be made by the council to get to that number. Each of the last 2 years, we had a benchmark number. That wasn't exactly where we ended up, right? It's just, it gives us a way to understand the impact as we're working towards it.
Mr. Mayor, one thing that I think is important to understand is what it means when we talk about cutting 1% or cutting 2%. I'm sure the city manager will get into these pages, but on one of these pages, it says what the increase would be if we do nothing, and it would be 13.6%. So when we talk about, and that's on the budget increase, not the tax levy increase, so it's not completely parallel, but in general, it's close. So what that means is as you decrease 1%, as you say, oh, I want to go to a 12.5% increase, an 11.5%, every percent is $640,000. So we're talking, is that correct? Yeah, so it's 1% of last year's budget, which was $64 million. So again, if you say a number, I don't think anyone's holding us to those numbers, but it is important. You know, I threw out a number, Tim said, well, that's going to be pretty tough to cut 8% out of this budget. You know, that's almost $5 million, and he makes a great point. So I think as we talk about these numbers, it is important to know what it means. Because I remember my first budget, I'm just throwing out numbers, and you don't necessarily know what that means when you're saying that. So, but that's an important number, is what 1% means.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. Anything further, Councilor Butler?
I appreciate that. I think the council is fully aligned, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but in the idea lower is better. And certainly being able to approach that, and appreciate that everybody is very motivated toward approaching that on behalf of the community. At the same time, balancing the commitments that are made that really help the city to fulfill a lot of the needs of the folks in the community. My wishful thinking in a Pollyanna sort of way is 3.5 to 4 feels really nice and pretty unrealistic. And so with that, I'm sure there's lots we will consider between now and our kind of final response. But for now, I'm going to cut the middle of Councilor Cowan and Councilor Platts and go with 7.5%.
Councilor Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You probably know I've done 14 of these budgets, and I know we've only had 1 or 2 that ever came down to where we wanted it. But I definitely are shooting for the 5%. I know that's a very deep well to get into, but I think as we move through here, the number may have to go up some, but that's where I think I'm at, around 5.5 at this point.
So given that, I guess we got a pretty wide range here. So perhaps we take Councilor Butler's number of 7.5%. It's kind of in the middle of the range. And I would see what the council thinks about that. We'd use that as a working number as we start through the budget and we see how easy or difficult it is to get there. We can have more conversations about if we want to switch to a different benchmark that we're working towards. So that's sort of in the middle of the range. Would that be acceptable as a working number for us to use as a benchmark as we start out?
It is, yes. Another question, are there any metrics that we have? I understand we don't know what the assessment is going to be. Are there metrics we use throughout the year that might give us a sense of if we've added value in the city, or is that a fool's errand?
So I think this is very difficult to say because you're really sort of dealing in probabilities of things that are maybe more likely than not. I think that those of you that closely follow what's going on in the housing market, it's probably more likely than not that we won't have a market rate adjustment this year. If you follow reports coming out of planning and what's going on around the city, it's certainly more likely than not that we will have some increase in valuation from new construction, renovation, and whatnot. How much that is of not something that's easy to determine. If it was, the assessor would be sitting over there with the finance director and the city manager today telling us what the number is. So I think, you know, sort of your observation, Council Platts, earlier, that it's probably more likely than not that whatever percentage increase we get on the tax levy, that the mill rate will be marginally less than that, but not a lot. And of course, there's a lot of work to determine if any intermediary action such as market rate adjustment should take place. But it seems like that's probably unlikely this year. I don't know how helpful that is, but
I think the second you said it's probabilistic,
right.
That to me says we should not bank on it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, any other final thoughts on this before we turn it over to the city manager to go through his presentation? Mr. Manager?
On that lovely note, we'll get started, I guess. But yeah, it's, you know, I think I've mentioned this before. This is going to be a difficult year. We've had numerous pressing issues that were just, the timing is all coming together. And so it will be a challenge. I think that we've set up several budget workshops to start working through this. As you work through this, we'll be working on our end to come up with, you know, we'll run out scenarios for you once you give us numbers, right? As you say, hey, I think this should be leaning towards this way. What impact would that have on city services? We'll run all that out. Well, that's what we'll do. We'll dig into that. We'll get you numbers so that you're making informed decisions. Because when you're looking at $3.9 million coming off what's being proposed, that's 100% services. There's no, you know, there's some room around that. You could say, look, we really want to explore what revenue do you bring in for pay as you throw, right? So there's trash options that you can be looking at for solid waste. There's things that you can look at. You're shifting costs when you look at those, right? That means it's not in my tax base, but I'm paying somehow. And so we'll work through that with you as you think of those ideas and you want to know what's the impact of that. We'll work that through. So we'll dig into tonight, as the mayor said. This is manager's proposed. Now, by charter, I will give you the official manager proposed at your first meeting in April. So I've got till then by charter to get that to you, only because there might be some revisions that come along. However, the structure of my budget won't change. What you see here is the manager's budget. That really won't change much at all. However, Friday night, we were still getting some refined numbers coming in on certain things, so we're making adjustments. What you're seeing here is probably 99% accurate of where we're at. There might be some little modifications as Public Works finalizes what the salt bid's going to be. That might adjust this as we start working through some of those, but there will be really some minor changes. So you're basically seeing what the manager's proposed budget will be on April 6th. What we'll start adding to our worksheet as we work through the budget process with you is you're going to see what will appear on that budget sheet is now a council proposed. So as you come to some agreement, yes, as we do straw polling, we say, is everybody in alignment with bringing this into the budget? And there's folks that are saying, yes, that's what it is. We'll start making those adjustments. We'll start getting that into your council proposed. So that way there, when you actually vote on your budget, you'll vote on things that you've already worked up. And that way there, we're not going through and making 20 different amendments to the city manager's budget for your budget. What you can do if the counselor says, look, I wasn't in favor of that, I'm still not in favor of it, and I want to make an amendment to that council proposed budget, you'll be able to do that and see if the votes are there to be able to strike something out. But as we work through this and we say, look, there was a majority of the group that wanted this included, we'll make that we'll make that adjustment. So that's what you'll see on the council proposed. So the other thing I want to mention is that on the we really work at full transparency with the public. There's many that will be watching this, paying close attention to the budget. So on the city's website, there is a budget tab. Actually, you can find the budget tab like in 3 different pages on the website, so it can get you there. So if people are looking for it, they'll be able to find it. Currently, that when you open that page, it's all FY26. What we'll do this week is we'll archive FY26. That's already in the books. So you'll see that in the archive tab. It'll be coming up under FY26. But what you'll start seeing is the FY27 numbers. And what we've done in the past is we've added presentations that we've done at each of the workshops. We'll put them on there so the public can go back and say, I wanted to see that presentation. How did that number change? They'll be able to access that. So we'll start working through that with you. I think the mayor talked about benchmarking. So your initial benchmark was set on February 2nd when the superintendent and I came before you and we said, what do you want to see in this budget? And the direction that we received was no new programs. So this is your first budget, your first benchmark, I guess I would say. So as the mayor said, that benchmark's going to adjust as you work through and you start having conversations. But the initial benchmark was no new directives within the budget, maintain current programs and services, and this budget really focuses on that, sustaining those operations, but it also includes contractual obligations. So some of that might be through a contracted service we have, whether that be a software program or something. We might have something that's built in increases on that, whether it's Microsoft or whatever we might be using. Munis, our audit. So we contract out our audit every year. That audit goes up. Whatever that new year is, that number was built in. The new amount is, rather. We built it into this year. So that's the contractual obligations as well as collective bargaining agreement obligations. So you currently have several contracts that are either at first, second, third year of their contracts. If there's an amount that was already agreed upon, that has been built into this budget. The other thing to keep in mind is that if there's a collective bargaining agreement that expires June 30th, however, there are items within that collective bargaining agreement that carry over, regardless of whether or not they have a new contract or not, those numbers are built into this budget. So step increases. Step increases are built in the budget, and so the directors factored those step increases based on the amount that we already know, which is the FY26 wage amount. We've built those into this budget as well. So as we work through negotiations and we have a new a new wage scale. The steps are already in there, just the adjustment for whatever that COLA will be, or other negotiated amounts might need to be in there, whether it's a stipend or whatever it is, that will be adjusted later on. So that's what we mean by contractual obligations within this. So the breakdown, what you'll see is what we actually expended on this in FY '25, what the council adopted budget was in FY '26, and now what the manager proposed budget is in FY '27. And like I said, you'll start seeing the council proposed column, and then what we'll end up doing is the increase, decrease from prior year will then be built off from your column, not mine. And so that's how you'll see this page shift. We'll have some other summary pages that'll be in your budget sheet. It's easier sometimes as you look at what I did in this here, when Kelsey and I and Dennis were working on this, we stripped out school. So now you're just looking at the city budget. Some of those other summary sheets in the past, once we have the school numbers, you'll see the school number built into that. But we really wanted to just provide you the stripped down version of what you'll be looking at, and that's everything to do with municipal expenses. So as we start off with general government, you'll see these. I do have a few departments that I pulled out only because there were some drivers in that budget, and I felt like we should probably talk about that. And so I pulled those out. But for the most part, general government is all other departments and programs. So you're looking at finance department, city manager's office, HR, library services. They're all built into that general government column. And as you see, that general government actually decreased. The reason for that, the driver is we've had increases in other departments, just like you see in these departments down below. But the real driver that dropped general government was general assistance. So general assistance, our numbers are tracking lower. So we did not need to budget as much. Now, I'd like to say that's a great positive, take that, yes. However, on the flip side, when we start talking about revenue, and we'll do that at the next workshop, that means our revenue decreased for general assistance because the state reimburses us 70% of that general assistance budget. So it's a little deceiving when you look at it expenses, but when we start putting it all together, you'll see what our total impact is. Now that is already in, if you look further down on the slide, you'll see where our revenue line item is. That's already factored in there, but we'll work on that as we get to that. So fringe benefits, the piece here for you to keep in mind is that health insurance had an increase of 11%. So that's really the driver here. You have some we always have adjustments throughout the year. People leave, some people come in. We might have people that were on a single plan. We hired somebody on a health insurance plan. We hired them and now they're on a family plan. So or somebody chose, we have for retirement options, there's Maine State Retirement, or they can opt out of that and go into a regular 401k option. If it is, it's a different percentage amount. So we've made all those adjustments based on the current staff that we have. That's what's factored in there, and so that's the driver of that line item. IT looks real deceiving, and that's what I wanted to pull out for you, because when you see that $201,000 increase, one thing that we've been doing, and we started this last year for those counselors that were here before, one thing that we started doing was we started pulling certain line items out of departments because we wanted to have better oversight over some of the costs. One of those is software applications. Software applications was mixed. You had some in IT, you had some within the department, and we really wanted to get those all centralized. We now have a process if a department's adding software, it's a whole internal approval process for that software to even be added. But then we also have a review process that IT is doing to determine, is that application even being used? right? If it is, do we need as many seats as we might be paying for? Because Jill, our IT director, is able to look at it and say, only 5 people have gone onto this application. Is it something we should be having, or should we pull it off? So, so that's why that's a little deceiving. That means some of those numbers came down in those individual department budgets, mostly like police and fire. That's where you'll see most of those. But they came out of that and they went into that IT line item. One thing that we'll do as we dig into the individual review of some of these drivers, we'll have a complete handout for you that actually shows all of our software applications. You'll be able to take a look at those, because we're assessing those now. And so when I talked about there might be some adjustments on the manager's side, we're working that internally right now, and we're saying, is this necessary? Do we need to remove this? And so there might be some adjustments based on that as we can complete our review. Fire and EMS transport. So fire does have negotiated, they're in a current collective bargaining agreement. So their contract is in full. But what you see in here is, because they did not have one last year, the FY26 budget did not include their salary increase, because we use a line item called salary reserve for contracts that are expired, but we know we're negotiating, so that we just can't put that fixed amount in their salary line item for that department, and then we negotiate a contract and now we didn't have the funds for it. So we actually use a line item called salary reserve. And so there's money in there for us to negotiate a new contract, and then we're able to pull that money out of that salary reserve account to make sure that those budgets stay below what was projected. And so that means that FY26 increase for salaries for the firefighters is in this, plus the FY27 increase is also in there. And then the third driver for this is when the council approved the third ambulance for fire, for EMS, we only budgeted for 6 months last year. So now we're picking up the remaining of that 6 month of that third ambulance. And again, we'll get, as we talk about departments, we'll get into some of the details of what that third ambulance is, what is it doing for us, what's the calls, so we'll get into those at each of the workshops that we work through. So police, the driver here really is the command unit had their FY26 and their FY27 increase worked into here, because they also had no contract when we settled the budget in FY26, and then there's some other contractual obligations that were also built into here. So that's the driver for PD. Public Works, one thing that I did with Public Works is I pulled out solid waste and water and sewer, because I want to talk about those separately. So normally Public Works would include those next two line items. First change that we did is that in Public Works, they do not have there's 2 collective bargaining units within Public Works. Both of those are expiring this year, so there's no number for any wage increases built in here. But what is in here are just costs of material increases. That's what you're seeing here, as well as we had a position within planning and permitting for the city electrician. And it's really not just an inspector role. With the retirement of Charlie DeAngelis, who was our city electrician for about 46 years, as we were filling that position, we see that it's really important to have that position over our electricians as well. So yes, the city electrician will be within Public Works. That's where we have our electricians who do the maintenance, but we also have that person that will also do code, much like what we do currently with fire. There are fire codes. There's a fire prevention officer within fire that takes care of and does the code inspections for that. We're looking to do the same thing with the city electrician, because a good portion of what Charlie was doing was maintenance, not just code inspection. So you would often see Charlie in a truck or working the poles, those things. So we see that more as a maintenance, but also doing inspections. So that's why that position moved into Public Works. Solid waste, I'm gonna have a slide coming up here, probably the next 2 slides, where I'll talk about solid waste and the breakdown for that. But obviously a 28% increase in our solid waste. Part of that has to do with the increase for our tipping fees for Maine Waste to Energy, as well as we're in year 2 of we'll be going into year 2 of our Casella contract. Year 2 also includes automation. Automation includes purchasing of bins. And so that factor is in here. And when I talked before about there's some other options you could consider, some communities look at individual community members have to pay for their bins. We have it built into the cost here. So that's something that we can, as you're talking about what are our other options, that's an option we could consider. So I'll get into that a little bit when I get to that slide. And then water and sewer, if any of you noticed, I think it was an article recently, I think we put some information out, water and sewer voted on an 8% increase in their costs. We had built in a cost increase last year that didn't happen, but one thing there's a combination of things happening here. One is that, the other one is, when I mentioned before, we had all the departments had all their different line items and we consolidated all those. Once we consolidated them, what we realized was that you didn't want to be under budget. So if you have 8 different departments, there was a little bit added to each one of those line items for water and sewer. When we consolidated them all, and then we had a whole year of watching that, we were over budgeting in that line item. So we've been able to reduce some of that, but also we factored in an increase that didn't happen last year for water and sewer. The real driver on that isn't as much as our usage, as much as it is we have to pay a fire protective fee for every fire hydrant we have in Auburn. And so that means that fee for each of our 300 plus fire hydrants increased 8%. So, but we thought there was going to be an increase last year, so that was built in, plus the offset of changing this to one line item means that we've already absorbed the increase, I guess is what I'm getting at. So I just don't want people to say, how's everybody else's water and sewer going up 8% and you're not seeing it here? That's why you're not seeing it. One thing that, when we talk about general government, one thing I had shared before was regarding our full-time employees. Last year in FY26, our total employees was 255.5 employees. This year, we've reduced that by 2. However, they were grant positions. So we had lead grant that was being operated under CDBG. That lead grant went away. Those positions went away. And so you're not seeing a direct change in funding. So you're not going to see, well, we should see two positions less in our costs. You're not, because it was in a grant.
Phil, are those budgeted positions or actual human heads? The 255 and 253?
Yeah, great question. I think it's always a moving number. I would say that for the most part, these are budgeted positions. We probably have it's probably less than 5 vacancies, I think. Oh, 2 vacancies. So we're pretty close. So, but yeah, that's a great question. So those are our budgeted. And you'll see that we historically will make changes where changes make sense throughout the year. And so if there's a position in a certain department and it makes more sense to move that position, change that workload, whatever it is, we'll make those adjustments. So you'll see city manager's office, good example. You started, it was 3 last year, now it's 4. What we did was we moved the grants. There was a grants administrator position in finance. We moved that position to the city manager's office because it's now grants and special projects. And so you see that 1 up on city manager, but if you look at finance, you'll see it's 1 down because that position moved. So, and you'll see that throughout here. I think planning and permitting is another good one. You see it go from 10 to 9. Well, that moved down to PW, but you'll notice PW stays the same only because we contracted out the GIS services. GIS used to be a person, now we're outsourcing that. We found value in that, so we outsourced that, but then that other employee was made up somewhere else in this list. Solid waste impact, as I mentioned, we'll just wanted to break this down for you. If you look at solid waste disposal, so that's what we're paying Maine Waste to Energy. They receive our waste. We have a tipping fee that's established. Last year was $54 a ton for our tipping fee. This year will be $88 a ton. So there's the change within that. Our numbers stay pretty consistent. We're seeing a little bit of drop, but nothing to really make me think that we're going to see these dramatic changes with what we're bringing in.
Are we seeing anything on this graph reflecting, didn't we truncate bulky waste drop off? Does that show up in any of
It's
these?
showing on here, yeah. It's under the miscellaneous. So, one thing that we just added, Dennis, 21 locations, 23, 21 locations for organic waste collection. Our goal with that is we're pulling that out of our solid waste disposal fee, right? The more that we can take out of the solid waste stream is a benefit for us. And so you'll see our organic waste is less than $20,000 in FY27. But our goal is that will help. It'll help Maine Waste to Energy as well, because we're not putting wet organic material in the burner. And so that becomes more efficient, but it's also, we're pulling it out of our stream that we're paying now $88 a ton on. The collection, the collection itself, if we had, without the bins, would have actually dropped in our year 2 of our contract with Casella. But we had to add $312,000 for our purchase and management of our bins. And so that is set to happen July 1st. That's their target, Casella's target. That's actually built into our contract that they would be ready. Their trucks are ready for that automation. There's a lift on our end because there's a lot of moving pieces with this. You're going to have ordinance changes as a result of the way that our ordinance is written regarding solid waste collection. So you'll have some ordinance changes. You'll also have changes in ordinance as it pertains to parking on streets, because we can't have parking on a street and put bins on waste collection day. So there's going to be some changes within that. The team's working through all that right now. But that's why you see this increase here, is because it's for the bins. You'll be paying for those bins over the next 4 years. So it was a 5-year contract. We're implementing it in year 2. You'll pay for it in year 2, 3, 4, and 5. At some point after that contract, we'll need to, and we renegotiate, we'll have to do something regarding the management of it. We outsource all the management of this, so they'll do the deliveries, all of that. So, and maintaining it. If there's damage to a bin, that's all taken care of through Casella. So,
If somebody needs more than one bin, are they gonna be able to buy it, or?
you can only have one bin, and you can have one recycle bin. That will be, but it's a 90 gallon, 94 gallon, I can't remember. Somewhere's around 90 gallon bin. So it's going to be a good sized bin. But that'll be the only bin that every home gets one bin. So there's a lot of education that's going to go with this. We're talking about doing a full campaign, a communication campaign, as we start gearing this up. But yeah, that'll be a change, Councilor Walker. Now, there's another piece where, I think Dennis started probably working on it today, was regarding multifamilies, what we do. I think it's less than 4 units we pick up. Anything greater than 4 units, they can contract with us. We'll work on setting those new rates and what that will look like for units that are greater than 3.
What are we gonna do about Christmas time? We all know that there's 10 times more trash on that weekend, especially if it's Christmas. What are we gonna do with all the people? They're gonna put it out there and let it sit on the side?
No, it's gonna be in that bin, but go ahead, Dennis.
You're right. There's certainly more increase during that time, but everyone also gets a recycling bin. So I think, and that's not something that, and it's a good sized recycling bin. So cardboard, that type of material that can be recycled can help offset some of the impact on the solid waste bin. A number of communities have gone to this already, and we did ask that question through the process of just trying to understand that. And it seems to balance out if folks use the recycling bin for again, a lot of cardboard, a lot of paper that you get, all of that is recyclable, and it is able to help offset that impact on the solid waste side.
Yeah. Yep. Counselor?
Is the recycling going to be picked up every week, or are we still going to be?
Yeah, so that's the next line item. So the recycling disposal, where we budgeted 91,000 FY '26, you'll see, I'm sorry, that's the, disposal stays the same. Collection, you'll see, goes from 288 to 455,000. That's because we're going to a weekly collection on recycling. Great question.
Is it zero sort, so it's easier for people just to throw it in there?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's like having two bins.
Yep. Then, as I mentioned before, the miscellaneous that you see on the FY '26, we had been doing the pilot project for organic waste. Some of that's in there, but the majority of that is the cost for bulky waste. So people last year could bring their bulky waste to Maine Waste Energy. There was no cost. They could bring it in, and they had to be a resident, but they could drop that off. That ended June 30th of FY '25. I'm sorry, in 2025, that ended in June 30th. It did not carry over into this FY '26 budget. So, but that was part of the cost for that in that year. So that's why you're seeing that full amount in there.
On the recycling, are they gonna tell us either weight or how much they're picking up every week when they go around with this? Because I can't figure out how they base that number.
Which number, the disposal or the
Well, from
collection?
288, recycling collection, 288 to 455.
They're basically just, so you're basically factoring in now, instead of collecting that weekly, there'll be, I mean, every other, well, it's not even every other week, right? It's twice a month they would collect. Now it's every week they're collecting. So it's really, they had some new costs. So you're seeing a reduction in that, but then you're seeing the increase because now they're going to be doing that recycling collection every week.
The bins that we had up near Public Works, what was that? Is that all recycling up there?
That's all recycling.
So we must know somewheres near what the weight is every month or?
Yep. Yeah, that's how we're factoring in the disposal, because our disposals are pretty accurate. We're seeing pretty consistent numbers.
So we know there's two factors to that. There's the weight from the roll-offs, the tipping, the tonnage from the roll-offs, and the tipping tonnage from the roadside collection.
Yep.
And I believe that when we were going through that contract, there was some data that when we go to weekly, there's an expectation at least, and I think it's empirically based on experiences in other municipalities, we should see a greater participation rate in recycling. The every other week was so confusing, I couldn't even remember. So I ended up going over to the roll-offs almost all the time.
I saw you there, remember? That's right, I remember that.
We have to thank God there's not 60 days in a month, right? I mean, if we can't figure out 30, that's pretty bad, 4 weeks.
Well, there's that fifth week. That's what throws off it for people who are throwing. If you are that fifth week on that Tuesday, then it throws your week off. That's really the challenge with that. So it was trying to make it so that you weren't going an additional week with your waste, and I think that's why we did a schedule, and it still was not easy for people. But I think so that's going to be a huge impact with the solid waste. We can certainly dig into that more and have more conversations. As of right now, there was not any bulky waste in the FY26 budget. I carried no bulky waste in this budget because it was to hold the line on services. When we get to fiscal services, debt service, that's the number we've been talking about, right? That's really our driver in this budget. This does include your principal and interest for the public safety facility is in this. That's already bonded. That's been done already. So that's already finished. We have the amounts. We can, when we get into this further, one thing that we can provide is we can actually show, the mayor's right, I think that that percentage that you're going to see for that public safety that we shared, we're right on track of what we had done in our presentations. Where it's a little different is that over the length of the bond is where we're really able to reduce that greatly, because we were able to part of the bond, we were able to bond out for less years, and then we were able to get good credits. We were able to get a good rate when we locked in. We had a conservative rate when we had planned that and put it into the materials. So when you look at the total payout on that bond, we'll share with you, but it dropped considerably. So under the total payout. Kelsey?
Yeah, and to directly address something that Councilor Gary had mentioned was that timeline and what that looked like. So quick overview of bonding is that there's a 2-year window of when you bond that dollar amount and when that must be spent. The timeline of that project meant that we had to really look at how much of this are we going to need within the next 2 years, and also look at what kind of rates can we look at based on having a desirable bond. Obviously, a larger bond is more desirable to people who are bidding on our bonds. Generally, we get 3 to 4 bidders on our bond. We had 13 for this bond, which means if there's more bidders, there's better rates offered for you because they're all competing with each other to get these bonds. So there was a reason for doing it all in one. Those are the reasons, and it made a lot of sense to do it all in that larger package rather than doing another split. One, because we were going to need a lot of those funds before the next bond cycle was going to come out, so we would have had to do an off-cycle bond in order to get the funds needed to finish the project. Not desirable to do an off-cycle bond. Not a lot of people are looking to purchase or pay out for bonds at that time. So it really made sense for us to do that larger amount, and I know that does mean that we're not, spreading out those debt service payments. However, we did also push any principal and interest payments into the next year, so we did kind of, in a sense, spread it as much as we could at that time. That was one of our conditions of that bond, was to hold off on any interest payments, even though we were pulling it all now.
Good. So what you see in this, so I do have Kelsey and I just put in a placeholder. So that placeholder within this is that the FY27 CIP, we have a placeholder in for the same amount that you bonded last year. You as a council, as Councilor Platts had said, we really want to take a look at our CIP for FY27. As you work through that number might change. If that number drops, we'll drop this number because there is a interest amount that's in there, and only the interest. The principal does not get budgeted in the year that you approve that bond because all we have to pay for is the interest on that. So that's a moving number. The fixed number is that the 4.38 million is for the public safety. And so that's a fixed number. We know that's locked in. And then there's the fixed number of the FY26 bond is factored in there. A couple things in the FY26 and then also FY25. A couple of the drivers within that CIP is that we bonded the entire Engine 2 fire station over the last 3 years of CIP. We were able to break those into chunks as we were working through the bond for engine 2. So that's a $9 million infrastructure improvement that you have, that you've bonded over the last 3 years. Merrill Road's a good example. That was an added above and beyond. I'm talking about above and beyond what we normally do, right? So the above and beyond what we normally do is the $3 million for Merrill Road, what we normally bond for road reconstruction. That $3 million was added to our kind of fixed number, and then in the last 3 years, the other portion that was above and beyond is the $2 million. The $3 million for the PAL Center. And so PAL Center was a $9 million project. $3 million came from CIP, $3 million came from ARPA, and $3 million came from congressional funding, so direct spending. So those are kind of those projects that really kind of drove some of our debt over the last 3 years anyway. So, yeah.
When we, when we hone in on the CIP deliberations, will we see that 10-year debt schedule?
Yes.
So we'll know if something's dropping off in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years? Or,
Yep. Yeah. March 16th, that's the workshop that we'll start getting into that. You'll have that full spreadsheet.
I think it's worth, since probably the new councilors haven't heard this, but, I often hear from people in the community, well, there's all these projects all being done at once. So I think a little reflection on history is important here. So 13 years ago, the then city manager, DeShane, had a discussion with the city council regarding some deferred maintenance that had been going on for some time. There was some years where there was no capital spending, a couple of years, and there was reduced capital spending. And at that time, he pointed out that there were 5 critical projects that the city needed to take on, not to bond them within a 5-year period, but to complete the work within the 5-year period. And that was the high school, Marrow Road, the South Main Street Fire Station, the police station, and Central Fire Station. Those 2 have now been combined into a public safety building. The can got kicked down the road, and eventually we got to the high school, and the strategy that the city took was to defer other regular maintenance so that the bond amount, the debt service would be reduced, so when the high school came on, it wouldn't have a significant impact on taxes. You can see where all this is going, right? This infrastructure doesn't fix itself, and we've gotten to a point where these things are in such critical shape, they have to be done. So when the manager's talking about South Main Street Fire Station and Marrow Road and the public safety building, above and beyond our typical CIP spending, we're here because over the years the city has deferred those and deferred those and deferred those projects until we got to a critical state where there wasn't any ability to defer them any longer.
Yep. Mayor, I was just looking at the time. We can finish this slide. I don't know, we have a very short meeting. I don't know if you want to carry this over after.
Yeah, so finish this slide. We'll convene the regular meeting at 7. When we adjourn, we'll reconvene the workshop, and we'll finish up with the rest of the workshop item.
Okay, so the emergency reserve, Kelsey, do you want to cover that?
Yeah, so by charter, we have to budget for 0.5% of the total amount to be appropriated for all uses. It's the wording in the charter. So what that means is this proposed budget is the total appropriation plus school. We consider the school with whatever level they had last year is what we're looking at, or potential increase, but we are required to budget this by charter. It's 0.5% of the total amount to be appropriated. So that's why you see that increase. Obviously, the debt service has an effect on that. So we had to raise that to this 686,216. So that's a requirement. It's not anything that we can change because it is in the charter.
So we had made some adjustments on that. One thing that we wanted to make sure that we are in compliance is to have that. So you'll see 550 has probably been in there for several budget years. You'll also see that in the actual expended, you'll see it as 0. We didn't spend any funding out of that, that just goes back into general fund and, or fund balance rather. And so that just rolls over. Transfer to TIF, this is another one where we're always like a year behind, because as we mentioned, when the city assessor provides her numbers, when we get to valuation, mill rate, all those, there's another number that she also puts on that report, and that other number is the amount that is pulled out for TIF. So tax increment financing, that's the TIF amount. We'll get into more of TIF later on, but that's the funding that then is sheltered and brought into and used for other needs, other expenses. But so you'll see often the FY '27. If you go back to FY '25, it's that amount, because that's when we know what that amount was, and so that's the number we then budget moving forward. So so more to come on that, but that right now that's that. What's the driver on that line item? So we can pause here, Mayor.
Yep. Thanks very much. We'll adjourn the workshop to be reconvened after the conclusion of the council meeting. The council will reconvene at 7 p.m. for the regular council meeting. The March 2nd, 2026 Auburn City Council meeting will be called to order. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If we could have the councilors introduce themselves, starting with Councilor Gary.
Good evening, I'm Belinda Gary, City Councilor at Large.
Good evening, I'm Rachel Randall, City Councilor, Ward 1.
Hi there, Tim Cowan, City Council, Ward 2.
Good evening, City Councilor, Matthew Duval, City Councilor, Ward 3.
Good evening, Jeff Harmon, Mayor.
Good evening, Kelly Butler, Ward 4.
Good evening, Leroy Walker, City Council, Ward 5.
Good evening, Adam Platt, City Councilor at Large.
Good evening, Student Representative Brendan Edwards.
Good evening, Student Representative Mark Abdullahi.
Hi, Phil Kroll, City Manager.
Thank you. The first item of business tonight is approval of the minutes of the February 17, 2026 regular City Council meeting. Are there any errors or corrections? Not seeing any. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Moved by Councilor Walker, seconded by Councilor Platts. Vote will be by show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed? 7 having voted in the affirmative and none in the negative, the motion's adopted. The next item is communications. The council, through the city clerk, has received communication from the planning board and the Sustainability Natural Resources Management Board regarding Order 1601202026, which was the transmission from the city council to those boards and committees to give their review and recommendations regarding amendments to the solar ordinance. The original intention was to have this on the agenda tonight. One of the recommendations from the SNRB required some additional review. This will appear, and their actual reports will be in the package on March 16th. So this is just acknowledging the receipt within the timeline specified by the council. We'll move on to the first open session of the evening. If there's any members of the public who would like to address the council regarding items not on tonight's agenda, please approach the podium and provide your name and address.
Good evening, Council and Mayor Harmon. Senator Bruce Bickford from Auburn. I represent Auburn, Poland, New Gloucester, and Durham. I'm here just to give you a quick overview of what we're doing right now in Augusta regarding a couple things. One is the Property Tax Relief Task Force, which is very hard to say fast. I've had Emily hand out packets to you. I believe that you have them. I'll hold it up here so I can see it. All right, just so you understand how this task force was designed, it has 5 members appointed by the President of the Senate, 5 members appointed by the Speaker of the House, and 3 members are appointed by the Governor, 2 with expertise in municipal government, municipal taxation, local government, finance, or property valuation, and 1 who represents the interest of the aging community. So the recommendations that we have right now, they're preliminary. We will be getting an overview in taxation on Wednesday from the initial recommendations that we've put out from the task force. The first recommendation is that the Taxation Committee submits legislation to authorize us to have an additional 6 meetings in 2026. The second recommendation is that it recommends the Taxation Committee, in consultation with the Maine Municipal Association and other municipal representatives, identify the burdens associated with and streamline the process for municipalities to allow taxpayers to make monthly real estate property tax payments directly to the municipality. I'm not sure if that's something Auburn does. Some municipalities do that already. The third recommendation, recommended taxation committee in consultation with MMA and other municipal representatives consider methods to increase the communication of information to taxpayers about property tax relief programs, including, but not limited to, through the provision of informational inserts in real estate property tax bills. The task force recommends that the committee ensure that it considers methods that provide property tax relief information to renters and other eligible individuals who may not receive a real estate property tax bill. The fourth recommendation is that the Taxation Committee considers immediate changes to existing real estate property tax relief programs in a second regular session of the 132nd Legislature. The committee focus on the property tax fairness credit as the most targeted tool to provide such relief. The committee should consider allowing a taxpayer's income tax credit to possibly offset the property tax bill, rather than waiting until the end of the year and getting that property tax relief check, possibly have it directly impact their property tax bill as the year goes on. That was something else we had talked about. Recommendation 5, Taxation Committee considers changes to the homestead exemption in the second regular session. A majority of the tax force supports increasing the current homestead exemption to account for inflation, as the homestead exemption is a good policy tool for providing broad relief. The sixth recommendation recommends the Taxation Committee submit legislation to create one or more working groups to review property tax exemptions or current use programs to evaluate whether the exemption and the programs continue to meet the purposes for which they were established and are efficient to administer at a local level. The seventh recommendation, the task force recommends that the legislature enact legislation that encourages continued interlocal, regional, and statewide partnerships to increase efficiency in administering municipal level and county level services and reduce municipal and county costs. One area that we talked about, two areas that we talked about specifically were, for example, your 911. Do we have a county-wide 911 or do we have a local 911 and a county 911? When you are looking at your zoning, do you want zoning to be local or do you want it to be county-wide? Permitting, do you want that to be local or county-wide? Those are the kind of things that we have been talking about. And again, this is a work in progress, but those are just ideas that have been put forward. Recommendation 8, recommend the Taxation Committee review the reports required by the Maine Education Policy Research Institute and from the County Corrections Professional Standards Council. We recommend that the committee consider the findings and recommendations in these reports when making policy decisions in the second regular session of the 132nd Legislature. So those are some of the things that we've been talking about. One of the subjects that's come up that's gotten a lot of attention has been county jails. County jails have been a big impact to a lot of municipalities because it's been, I think it's been 8 or 10 years that the county has received the same funds year after year for their jails. And when that law was first passed, it was 20% of the cost, I believe. And that percentage is down close to 10% now because the dollars haven't changed, but the costs have gone up. Those are some of the things we're wrestling with right now. And again, this is preliminary. This hasn't even been presented to the taxation committee yet. But we do plan on having a lot more meetings, and we have a study being done across the United States as to what is happening in other states and jurisdictions for property taxes. One I can think of offhand is Florida, for example. In their constitution, once you turn 65, your property taxes are frozen. You don't pay any more income property tax until you sell your property or you pass away and your heirs inherit the property. Only then does a revaluation happen and the new property owner assumes the new property tax. There's no arrears. There's no payback. So, something to look at, you know. Who does it impact? Who does it hurt? It may hurt the young family starting out. So, you have to look at all the different things. The other thing I wanted to bring up tonight, and this is critical, we have a property tax fairness credit and a sales tax fairness credit. These programs are so underutilized because we have, an example is senior citizens. If they're on Social Security and no other income, they don't file a Maine state tax form. They don't know that they have an opportunity to make, $1,000, $2,000 when tax season rolls around because they paid property tax and it was over a certain percentage of their income. Not only does it affect senior citizens, but it affects renters. If you pay a large percent of your salary to rent and you make under a certain amount of money, then you're able to use the property tax fairness credit to your benefit. Something I didn't pass out, but some rules to the road from Maine Revenue Service is I believe I looked up the dollar amount, the maximum dollar amount you can make to qualify for the property tax fairness credit is $65,000, married filing joint. Single was, I believe, $33,000. But some questions came up during a presentation I had with some seniors. I think Leroy was there. Some of the questions came up were, well, what happens if we receive VA benefits? The answer I got from MRS is that VA benefits don't count. Again, I'm not a tax expert, I'm just telling you what I was given in writing by MRS. And I have, I believe, some other questions answered. I'm really organized, can you tell? Oh, here it is. So another question came up. Oh, for people who live in a mobile home park, and they have to pay monthly lot rent. Does that lot rent count as rent? And the answer I got was, the linked rule says rent does not include amounts paid for heat, utilities, furniture, furnishings, appliances, housekeeping services, medical services, transportation, or for anything other than the right to occupy a homestead. I think the monthly payment is what gives the resident the right to occupy the homestead and should count. And this is from Anya, who is a CPA. Benefits, let me see if there's another thing here. Residents of nursing homes who receive Social Security benefits, are they eligible for the property tax fairness credit? No, they're not. Because according to the rules, a dwelling does not include room and board in a nursing home room or a room in another three-person's private home. So it would consider room and board, and it wouldn't be considered rent. So for seniors to reach out, who they can reach out to, AARP has tax help at Sacred Heart. And I don't have the phone number or the address to Sacred Heart or AARP. But most seniors have their handy card with them, and if they do, they can probably call that number. But I think it would be really important for you on the council, as well as us in the legislature, to reach out. Let people know how important this property tax fairness credit is so important. And the sales tax fairness credit, it doesn't matter what you spent for the year on sales tax. Based on your income, you get a flat amount. So, an example, for example, if you're a married couple and you make, between the two of you, $50,000 a year, you get, with no questions asked, $280 from the state to pay you back for the sales tax that you would have paid in during the year. If you're a single person and you make $25,000, you get $155. No questions asked. And you don't have to file a state income tax to qualify for that. So the only other thing I wanted to bring up tonight is DOT released their work plans for the Auburn area. There are tons of transportation projects happening. The ones that I have outlined are, they're replacing a large cross-culvert bridge, cross-culvert on Lakeshore Drive. They're replacing the Taylor Brook Bridge over Taylor Brook on Poland Road. They're continuing to fund assistance for CityLink service to Lewiston Auburn Transit Committee. Multiple highway paving projects in Durham and Poland, and they are replacing the Royal River Bridge over Royal River in New Gloucester, which is just as you leave Auburn into New Gloucester. So, any questions, I'd be glad to take them while I'm still standing on these legs.
Thank you, Senator Bickford. We appreciate you coming in tonight. A few follow-ups to Senator Bickford's remarks. I'm glad to see that Representative Libby and Representative Chapman are in the audience here tonight.
Yes.
They'll recall that the council met with the legislative delegation after the last election. We had considerable discussions regarding property tax. Many of the items that the property task force are taking up were similar concerns across the state to what the council had pointed out. The city is actively involved in interaction with the task force. Maine Municipal Association, Maine Mayor's Coalition that I sit on actively interact with them, and the Service Center Coalition that the city manager sits on does as well. The city manager from Waterville and city manager from Bangor are both members of the task force and do a really great job representing municipal interest. A couple of questions came up. The city currently allows monthly payments. People who have difficulty with their property tax payments can work with finance to set up monthly payment plans. And we would remind the council that the city did a citywide mailing to all residents last year regarding the property tax fairness credit and the sales tax credit for the very reasons that the senator pointed out. And of course, the property tax fairness credit is an integral piece for seniors in applying for the city's senior property tax relief program. So, Senator, thanks very much for coming in. We appreciate the information.
I just want to add, there was a couple other things that came up, and they're not in any of our recommendations, but a couple of things that did come up were, what about seasonal renters, seasonal homeowners? Shouldn't they pay a higher property tax? And my response was, well, they're not paying for schools, and they're paying for schools with no children in schools, and you want to charge them more sales tax, property tax. I push back on that a little bit, but the other thing that came up was payment in lieu of taxes for nonprofits. It was something that came up. It's something that will be discussed more. It's not in part of the recommendations, but that was one of the other hot topics that came up. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Senator. If any other member of the public would like to address the council on items that aren't on tonight's agenda, please approach the podium and provide your name and address.
Thank you, Mayor Harmon and members of the council. My name is Laura Libby. I represent North Auburn and Minot in the State House, and I serve as the executive director for Lead Maine. We're a grassroots organization focused on educating and empowering Maine citizens. I'm here tonight, though, as an Auburn citizen in regards to the installation of flock license plate reader cameras by the police department last year. After it received a grant from the Federal Department of Homeland Security, there was no public hearing prior to the cameras being installed. There was no council vote, and there was no notice to Auburn citizens whose movements would be tracked. This recently came to my attention a short time ago due to the work that the ACLU has done throughout the state regarding these cameras. And to be clear, this isn't just about $24,000 that is looking to be allocated in the next budget. It's about whether the people of Auburn get a chance to weigh in and share their opinions when the government decides to surveil them. Since the cameras have been installed, these cameras have been photographing the license plates of every vehicle that passes, logging the time, location, and direction of travel. According to Flock's own data, in a single 30-day period, these cameras detected nearly 190,000 individual unique vehicles. This is mass surveillance of an entire community. This is operating in silence with no citizen awareness, funded by the federal government with zero public input and oversight. And now, because the grant money has run out, this council is being asked to pick up the tab. And by extension, not this council, because this council does not have any money, Auburn citizens are being asked to pick up the tab. This is completely backwards. The people of Auburn should not learn that their city has been surveilling them for years, or at least a year, because the bill is now coming due. to the members of this council, you all owe the people of Auburn more than that. You owe them transparency. You owe them the chance to weigh in before their government tracks their movements, not after. And the fact that a federal grant made this possible without your vote does not make it acceptable. It makes it worse. It means that a decision of this magnitude was made without any elected official in this city being accountable for it. So please do not simply fold this into the budget and move on. If Auburn is going to operate a mass surveillance system, then that decision should be made in the open with complete transparency and accountability, with a dedicated public hearing that Auburn citizens can speak at, with a clear use policy, with questions answered as to where this data is going and what is being shared with not just Flock, but with other cities, and with the informed full consent of the people who live here. Anything less than that is an absolute and complete failure on the part of this local government to have accountability and transparency to the people that you are supposed to represent. I urge you to reject this funding request at the very least until a full public process can play out. The people of Auburn deserve better than finding out that their city has been watching them only because the initial funding has run out. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public who'd like to address the council? Please approach the podium and provide your name and address.
Hi, yes. My name is Justin Young. I live in Ward 4. I wanted to talk tonight because I had some concerns as a real estate investor here in Auburn. I've lived here for a few years now. Recently, there was a proposal by Democrats in Portland to enact a 60-day eviction moratorium to Janet Mills. Now, and that's in response to the ICE activity in Maine, which I'm not even going to get into, but simply put, employing or even harboring illegal aliens is illegal, and legislating to defend them or keep them housed is treason. But of course, if Janet Mills, if and when she enacts this moratorium, you can expect that for 60 days, landlords will not receive a paycheck, myself included. What that means, I mean, some people might, lose their house, may miss a payment on the mortgage, whatever that could mean. It's problematic. And I think that that also sets a precedent too, because it could happen more than once. It could happen again and again and again now that, once they do it. But I think also in essence, it's communist as well. I mean, you're seizing people's properties and assets and, turning the tap off to their income. It's very important. Now, as the legislative municipality authority here in the city, I think I would wholly urge that every one of you reject this idea if and when this happens, because if we're to fix or even much less improve the housing crisis in the city or in the state, you're not going to do that by targeting business owners or landlords, much less. And I know there's a little fly buzzing around in the state somewhere in Graham Plattner's ear about protecting or defending business owners or landlords, but in essence, I'll close with this. I think that instead of focusing our attention on eviction moratoriums or rent freezes, or much less, security cameras or cameras that are going to be spying on us, how about we start focusing on housing the junkies that are roaming our streets, the needles that are trashed along the sidewalk, or deport all of the illegal immigrants that are in this city. Now I'll end it. I really do think I would implore each and every one of you again to reject this idea and stand up for the citizens, especially the landlords and the business owners, because we do employ and house the people of this city, and I don't think it would be very helpful to target them or based on a political agenda to accept anything that Janet Mills puts through, if she does. But I appreciate your time, and thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. Does any other member of the public like to address the council? Please approach the podium and provide your name and address.
Quentin Chapman, 51 Eastman Lane. Good to see you guys. Been a while. Been busy in Lewiston. Good times over there. So I can't help but think property tax is an unrealized gains tax, right? So flock cameras, we too often give up our security. We give up our freedoms for security to an AI overlord with weak men behind the cameras. I just don't agree with it. I think there should be some more thought into it. Solar panels, anybody thought about testing the soil around those? Are they leaching off chemicals? Good question, right? But my real point of being here tonight is the Auburn Public Library and their budget. I'm not sure why, but they've been told they have to end their agreement with Minot. They get $22,000 or $23,000 from Minot. They have about 300 library card holders. It works out to about $60 a person. It's been that way for a long time. And they were told if they didn't drop Minot from their share agreement, they'd lose $37,000. Now, I'm going off memory. I didn't take any notes. I don't have them with me right now. So I could be off a little bit, but I'm pretty sure I'm accurate. I didn't get a chance to listen to the meeting minutes, or you can't listen to them, read them. I'm busy in Augusta all the time and trying to keep up with my filling in potholes today. Keep up with my full-time job. Part of me kind of hopes I lose the election, then I can hang out here more. That'd be fun. But at any rate, Mayor Chapman, thank you. Thank you for listening. Please take some of the things I said in consideration.
Thank you. Is any other member of the public who'd like to address the council? Approach the podium. Please provide your name and address.
Hello, my name is Rudy Wing, 499 Penley Corner Road, Auburn, Maine. I'm a registered 501c3 since 2015. Been working on developing a program over there for veterans to bring them in and inspire them and move them forward in the community. And it's a sober facility that I'm planning. Everywhere we have to go as a veteran, there's alcohol, there's pull tabs, there's smoking. It takes that individual away from that family that goes to that place because he leaves his family home. So I've been planning and I've been doing a veteran program for 15 years now. It inspires veterans, and it's a racing program where they come in, they touch, smell, and feel, but it's about getting that core unit into my facility as a family, so that father that comes back from service that might have some issues. I'm sorry, I'm very emotional this week because when I was in the service, it was 248 Marines from the embassy that got killed that I had to serve to get back to their families. So I'm emotional, very emotional this week. But I've been to this place for 21 years working with you guys, and I'm frustrated. I can't get a permit for power. I'm living in the cold. I'm living in an RV with generators that cost me $15 a night. I'm living in the ag zone. I'm frustrated with what's going on over there. I've been there for 21 years. I know the story. I know what happened with the PFAS. I know everything that's going on there, and I know what's going on today. I'm frustrated. I've got a great plan. I'm working in Augusta. Your staff instructed me to go to Augusta because I can't get it changed here. I can't get me any help here. So now I went up, I spent the weekend in Caribou with a Governor-elect Libby, had a wonderful event up there with the man. He's got common sense. I'm driving him as hard as I can to get him in the governorship. If he gets here, he's going to bring common sense to Augusta. And he's going to get me a permit so I can have power and water on my land. I have a well, I have a septic system on that historical property that's in our history books in the library. I've done my time, I put my money, and I spent thousands of dollars to serve my community and help my at-risk kids and help my golf course across the street. 4.5-star golf course called Fox Ridge Golf Course in Auburn, Maine, which we don't even pay attention to, but to collect a tax payment. And all I want to do is utilize it to help me raise money so that I can take care of my veterans in this community. I'm frustrated, very frustrated, and I'm emotional this week because of what's going on overseas. And we need to start paying attention. We need to start waking up. We need to start caring about every individual in this community, and veterans are part of that. So I ask you to please start by doing the right thing. It is the city's fault that I'm in this situation. When I submitted my plan back in '04, they told me I didn't have the land I owned. I didn't have parcel 2. I only have a half an acre. That church was there in 1809. The bell was cast by Henry N. Hooper and Company. He bought the foundry from Paul Revere. This is where they mustered for the Civil War and came in and got their arms and their uniforms and went down and fought the war. Maine took the most casualties. And I have the land where they came and they did that. And this is where they went to church. And they traveled by horse and carriage to get across from Lewiston by barge to come to this church. But they don't want to see this history stay. They want to throw it away. Everybody knows who I'm talking about. Everybody knows what I'm doing. But I'm frustrated as a veteran. I'm being fined $2,500 every day. You guys have never collected the bill, thank you very much, because it's well over $1 million. I'm frustrated. I want to support my public golf course across the street. I want to help my veterans, and I want to help my at-risk kid community. And I have a wonderful program. We could bring them in and have fun. I know I got to work with you guys. I got to know I got to put the sprinkler systems in the building I want. But I'm in a camper since 2013 with a generator. I'm tired, and I got some good time left. And I'm built this 501c3 to leave this piece of property when I die, to stay in the position that I put it in with the board of directors that's going to run this thing and continuing on so we can have a sober place for veterans to come to in this community. That's what I'm trying to do. I've done 100 business plans submitted. You guys are going to give me, some of you have been here. Melinda's helped me. Leroy's helped me. I need help here. I'm reaching out tonight to this you guys have the power. You have the power. Help a guy out. I have nobody around me out there. Please come see 499 Penley Corner Road. Drive by, stop in, see me, see what I have for great ideas for my veterans in this community to come to so that I can help them. They need the help. And I'm here to provide that, provide something that you guys don't even have to pay for. I'm the one footing the bill. So please, do what's right, stand up, make what was wronged by this city, and stand up and make it right and give me my power back that I once have. I have a pumping station, I have a well I can't run. I run it off a generator, but I burn up 3 of them at $1,000 a piece. So propane is expensive. I'm living in a 1-inch wall since 2013, since I had the fire. I lost my whole life. And the city said, you got 1 year to rebuild. I'm a contractor. Every one of my tools were in that building that I lost that day. My life was gone, but the clothes on my back. And I got 1 year to put this place back. This is 2013. I'm just frustrated. I'm sorry I'm emotional, but I am. But you guys can make this right. Send me a letter in the mail. We don't have an electrician on board right now. I don't know if that excuses me, but I'd like to go to CMP and ask for power to be put back on my property in a temporary fashion. Nobody recognizes temporary power. Permanent power is when it goes to your home and the home's complete. Temporary power is when a contractor comes in and builds a home, he gets a request and puts temporary power on the property. That's all I want for now. I want to run my well so I can take a shower. I want to be able to do some things. And I think you guys can make the decision because I'm tired with your staff down there. Tired of it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wing.
Thank you.
Is there any other member of the public who'd like to address the City Council? Please approach the podium and provide your name and address.
Hi there, my name is David Strom, 38 Holly Street. I'm the owner of the deflockauburn.com website. I did send an email over the weekend, very detailed, got into some of the technical details, why I'm personally opposed to the flock cameras. I'm going to be very brief this evening, just I hope you take a moment and review that stuff that I've sent in and I'll be interested to see how this plays out. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Is there any other member of the public who'd like to address the council? Please approach the podium and provide your name and address. Not seeing any, the open session is closed. There's no unfinished or new business on the agenda this evening. We'll move on to reports. I just have one brief report. Last week, I was able to tour the new Maine Mill building, see the update on the construction. The city manager and assistant city manager and I were there in August. There's been a dramatic change. They're nearing completion. There'll be a opening in June. It's going to be very impressive and a real benefit to the community. So we'll invite all the councilors when we get to the point of the opening, and we'll move on from there. Councilor Gary.
I've got no report at this time.
Thank you.
Nothing tonight.
Thank you.
Nothing tonight.
Thank you.
Nothing tonight.
Councilor Buck.
Nothing tonight.
Councilor Walker.
Nothing.
The school department did not meet last week, but on Wednesday, we begin our budget deliberations.
Great, thank you. Representative.
Just to kind of update you guys on winter sports that are now over, we got second in boys and girls skiing. We lost to Lewiston in the first round of the boys hockey playoffs, and we lost for boys and girls basketball, and spring sports are about to start.
I'm done tonight.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, just a couple things. One, the annual report you now have at your desk. We also made that available to the public through an alert, and it's on the website. A lot of great information in there. We do call this Auburn by the numbers. I think you'll see why as you go through. You'll see the different stats from each of the departments and some of the highlights from this 2025 year. Also, on March 11th, I know Senator Bickford mentioned some DOT initiatives, but on March 11th, 2026, the advertisement for the traffic light at the intersection of Washington and Danville Corner Road will be publicized. So that project's moving ahead of schedule. And so we're pleased to see that, and we can get that advertised and get that project started. Will be a great addition to that corridor. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Just as a matter of scheduling, is there an estimate of the duration of the executive session?
Yeah, I think probably about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. I'm not sure if you want to just go
Yeah,
into
I think from a scheduling, the council moved back into work session. There's no expected action to be taken by the council after the executive session, so we'll move back into work session. And then on completion of that, we'll move into executive session and adjourn directly after we conclude the executive session.
All right, Mayor, Council, so we'll pick up where we left off. The following slide was related to intergovernmental programs. Really two drivers within this line item. First is county taxes. I think just a quick explanation. I think as you saw through the county tax process, they had a 13% increase. Our increase ended up being 9%. The county tax overall did increase 13%. However, due to state valuations and what the contributions or the changes within other municipalities, our percentage impact was 9%. And we just received that from the county treasurer. So that's how we received that information. Also, the LATC, which is our transit, that's a really small increase in comparison to some of these other line items. We are in our second year, this second budgeted year, but not a full year of our new provider for transit services. And so we're still working through some of that. transition and changes within that budget, but we feel very confident with this. Plus, we were using some funding that was left over through CARES money. So going back to the CARES funds that we received, we're drawing down some of that each year for the budget. That funding, though, is coming to an end. And so next year, you will no longer experience those CARE funds dollars because they have to be spent within this fiscal year. So next year, you'll see a sizable increase in transit. But we'll have more data from our new transportation model that we're using. We eliminated several fixed routes, but we expanded on-demand services with transit. And so we'll have more data on our usage of our transit system, and we'll be able to make some changes next year based on that. So, and then the last one is the Lewiston Auburn 911 Communications Center. This budget is really holding the line for the 911 center. No additional staffing is included into this line item request. We'll go into more detail as we work through the workshops. But part of this request is that 911 will be leaving Central Fire Station as we begin the public safety work there. They are moving into Auburn Hall on the 3rd floor. To get that construction started, we had to move the Criminal Investigation Division for the police department to 95 Main Street. So that's where they're currently located. There's a rent for that cost. We're billing the 911 center for that rent. This is half of that. We're sharing that with the city of Lewiston. So part of that increase as a result of that. So your intergovernmental total increase is 8.5%. Next slide is just your summary of the intergovernmental, the total municipal expenditures, which is the 13.7% that Councilor Platts had mentioned earlier as what we're faced with for a total increase. We do have your non-tax revenue. As I mentioned, we'll go over that at the next workshop. We'll dig into what are some of those drivers. How do we get to the $434,000 increase? Where is that coming from? Majority of that's state revenue share. Because as you recall, last year, those that were on the council, we made a sizable increase within our state revenue share to ensure that we were close to what we had projected or what the state had been projecting for revenue share dollars. It's a moving target. It's one that we watch. It's not fixed. There's no formula out there that tells us this is exactly what it is. However, we do receive predictions from the state revenue office. And so we take that. Kelsey and I spent some time with Dennis, and we talk about where do we think we're landing, what are some of the impacts, where is the changes, what's the economy looking like. We want to make sure we're pretty conservative on that. If the economy was to take a drastic turn, that would impact us greatly. And so the other piece that we're really monitoring on this, and we'll get into this later, but as cities' valuations shift, revenue share is broken into revenue share 1 and revenue share 2 for a formula. As valuations shift, there's potential for a municipality like Auburn to lose rev share 2. And so we're tracking that. We're constantly monitoring that. Over the last 2 years, Biddeford and South Portland have dropped off from revenue share 2 because of their valuation. They received no funding. Our revenue share 2 is about $3+ million. You lose that, that's a sizable increase for our community. So we are monitoring that. We'll continue monitoring that. The way revenue share 2 works is there's a fixed amount that goes into an allocation, and then those communities that will share that dollar amount, the ones that are designated, will share that amount based on a formula of our population, our poverty. There's a lot of different variations that go into that. So that's a fixed amount. So we all share part of that pie. As a community drops off, there might be another community that comes in, or the amount that's allocated gets parsed out differently. And so we've seen some increases there. And because of a Biddeford or South Portland dropping off, that shifts our allocation. So what we're monitoring is there a tipping point for Auburn? What does that look like? And so we'll continue watching that. We'll discuss more of that when we get into our non-tax revenue. So for those coming on, our non-tax revenue gets taken off from our what would be the tax levy that we've been talking about. So when you receive your council books, you're going to see a line item there that's here's the tax levy amount. We'll put some numbers in for school. We're just holding the line for school. We'll get numbers from school at some point, and then we'll plug those in, but we're just using last year's numbers as a placeholder for now. So it's really hard to see what the total tax levy will be for the city until we get more numbers from the school department. As we mentioned earlier, Councilor Platts looked ahead in the PowerPoint and stole the thunder here, but as I mentioned, we have some fixed costs within this. And so when you take a look at this slide, what we tried to break out for you is that, of the 13.7%, that $8.7 million, how is that broken out? And so fiscal services is 67%, which is the 5.8 million. And then 27% is for municipal services, the 2.3, and then intergovernmental is the 6% at 502,000. Couple pieces in here is that your actual fixed cost is $6,182,397. So if as a council, if you said that's all we want to increase, that's the number. You wouldn't be able to change that unless you really started cutting further into your numbers that you have available for you, right?
Can you say that again?
Yeah, 6,182,397. You get that by taking your fiscal service line item that I have in there, plus your county tax. Those are really the four categories, right? So it's TIF, emergency reserve, debt service, and county tax. Those are your fixed numbers. The remaining, so that's 71% of your total increase. So that 29% is that 2.5 million that you have to work with. Now, like I said, you have the entire budget as it pertains to the amount to work with. But for increases, that's what the driver is for the increase. We talked earlier about supplemental considerations. So your supplemental considerations are broken out into the city administration. So the first one that I have for that is the Maine drug enforcement agent. So we've had an agent in the past assigned to MDEA through different changes that was kind of removed a few years ago. We had more of a focus internally on drug enforcement. An opportunity came available to assign someone to Maine drug enforcement. Maine drug enforcement, you'll see the request is $151,000. That's the total cost for that agent. And then the revenue offset is that the state of Maine pays the full amount, the $151,000. So what I would be proposing is that you currently have 2 frozen positions within the police department. I'd recommend taking one of those frozen positions and allocating it for this MDE agent and have that revenue offset. So it's no impact on your budget. However, you do bring that frozen position back, and then there is a benefit with Maine drug enforcement, even though they are assigned to a region. However, they will focus on, those agents do focus on their communities that they're from, as well as a portion of any drug revenue that they receive is then split between those participating communities. So there is some benefit to that, but also you have someone that's paying attention to our community and working on drug cases that might be referred from either the detective or the patrol unit within the department. So the other one is what was mentioned earlier regarding the automatic license plate reader. So just a brief summary on this. This is coming forward as a what it would cost for a year for this program. The automatic license plate readers we've had since 2015 in the community. They were mounted on police vehicles. That was done through CIP funding from the council. The council approved that. We had those on a couple vehicles. Then that's evolved to these pole cameras is where we're at now. And so these are located throughout the city. That cost funds 7 fixed cameras and 1 flex, what's considered a flex camera that can be used as needed in an area that there may be a request for certain activity that you would need to apply that. We can get into that more about that program if that's something that the council moves forward for further discussions. The city council supplemental, Councilor Walker talked to me last week, and it's an area that I know that he's passionate about is regarding a parks department. This is something that we've had in the past. And then Parks was rolled into Public Works as part of the maintenance team. However, they have a division within Public Works that does focus on parks. However, one of the requests that Councilor Walker had mentioned, and he can share this as we get into workshops later, is that having that Parks Department, having a team that's just focused on parks and not pulled away for other services like snowstorms or street sweeping and some of those other things that some of the staff do roll into because of hitting certain priorities. I put in there to be determined because I would need to know whether or not the council has an interest in that before we start working up what the cost would be to stand up a separate department. And by charter, setting a department is by your authority. So you would do that through the budget process, and that's the process for that. I couldn't just stand up a department. Non-municipal supplemental request. These 4 areas, you have their request sheets. You should have received those. Yeah, at your desk. So LA Arts, what you have currently in the budget, if you're those that were on the council last year, recall the council did allocate $5,000 towards LA Arts. That's in this budget as presented. So I carried over existing services. So the $5,000 is in there. Their request would then be $32,500. And so that would be up for the council to decide. Haley Hugs, a request that came in from a 501c3 looking for $100 from the city. The drop-in services is requesting $43,000. And then we can get into how that's broken out later as we talk about the drop-in center and why that request and what in the letter you'll see it broken down into pretty close detail. We will be making that available on the website so people will be able to see the requests that came in from non-municipal entities. And then Life Flight sent us their annual request. They send that annually, but they requested $2,000. We work very closely with Life Flight. They are located at our Auburn Lewiston Airport. We can talk about what we currently provide for them now as part of kind of an in-service funding for Life Flight. So if we want to talk about that further, we can do that when we get into the supplemental pieces. And so, Mayor, I don't know if we want to tackle this now or before I move on. I only have like one more slide, I think.
Yeah, why don't you finish the slide
Okay.
and we'll go back.
Next one is just your budget schedule, just so that you have it. I have that as a separate sheet for you. This just gives you, there are some dates that are driven by charter. So I wanted you to be aware of that as we work through, as the mayor mentioned, going back, starting at the latest date, that final budget adoption is the June 30th. However, I have till April 30th to submit the city manager's budget to the council. Typically, I'll do that in that first week in April is when you'll have that as the final. And then there is a CIP deadline by charter for March 30th. I will be going before the planning board in accordance with charter to present the CIP to the planning board at their March 10th meeting. And then after I receive feedback from planning board, I'll bring that to you at the workshop on March 16th. So that's when we'll talk about CIP.
Great, thank you very much. We'll move back to the supplemental considerations. We're going to work through this this evening. As a reminder to the council that the way this works is that this isn't a recorded vote, but we'll get a sense from the council of whether they want to move some, all, none of these items onto the budget. Moving the item onto the budget says nothing about whether it will be funded or not. It just means that it will be in the budget discussion. If there are items that are not moved onto the budget, there will not be further discussion of them in the budget process. So we'll work down through these one by one. As the manager said, the MDEA is net neutral. It does not reduce the complement of police officers currently working in the city. There's two frozen positions. One would be unfrozen for the duration of the temporary duty assignment over to Maine Drug Enforcement. Any questions about this item? Councilors, we'll just do this, I guess, by show of hands, that would like to move this on to the budget? No? Okay, so, Kelsey, I guess you're going to, okay, thanks, you'll keep track of this, so we'll move that onto the budget. The next one is automatic license plate readers. We're not going to get into a substantive discussion of the policy about this. Here's what I would say. I've received numerous calls, I've received emails, I've had people come up and talk to me, send me social media. Almost everything they've sent is either inaccurate, incomplete, or taken out of context. So what's before the council tonight is simply whether we want to move this $24,000 onto the budget. If we do, there'll be a substantive policy discussion, and we can go into all the history of this. Reasons that the police department feels that this is an appropriate, a valuable tool to use, and we'll take into consideration the concerns that some residents have about the use. So my advice to the council would be that as you're taking this vote, it should not be that you've made some determination based on a public policy that we should use or not use these, because there is not sufficient factual information in front of the council, I don't believe, for anyone to make that decision at this point. So, as the manager said, the amount for these is $24,000. I guess I'd first ask if there's any particular questions about this, Council Platt?
Yeah, I completely agree with your diagnosis of the situation. Obviously, we have to have a conversation about it until we get to the merits of it. But my question is this: do you see any procedural difference if I'm inclined to oppose it and say that let's have the discussion, and if we like it, fund it through the fund balance? What are your thoughts about that? Is that an irresponsible way to look at this?
Well, I think that would be contrary to the fund balance policy that the council just adopted a few months ago. These are, and I'd ask the manager and the finance director to weigh in on this. But
can you remind us of the specifics of what?
We passed a policy that in effect identified fund balance to be used for emergency situations or one-time projects and not to be used to fund ongoing operational costs.
That's fair, that makes sense. So again, just to reiterate what you said, if we did move this forward, we all still have an opportunity to vote against it. It just means that we now get to have a discussion about it.
Yeah, so I think, look, this, if it's the sense of the council to move this on the budget, we'll have a full discussion about this. This will be a little different than some other budget items just because of the history of this and the public policy issues involved in it. So we would have, when we get to this, we'd have a full discussion. We would take direct public comment at that time. And the council could then get a full understanding of the operational and policy implications, and then make their decision as to whether they would like to fund the item or not. Councilor Randall.
I won't even consider funding this. We have way too strict of a budget to deal with, and I'm not interested in voting to put this on the budget.
Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not so cool with these type of cameras, but during the discussion, I mean, cameras within our city is nothing new. We've had cameras all over the city for years. So if we open, I mean, I'd like to see an open decision, a discussion on what other types of cameras do we have around the city? I mean, our good city manager, he must know, or the police department must know, so at least we can identify, so the public knows that the cameras we have, they may be there for security for people within the city, but they're not like these frock type cameras.
Yeah, so funding for the current cameras that the city has had installed for quite some time, the operation and maintenance of those, I believe, you can correct me, Mr. Manager, are included in the current services. These cameras are decidedly different. They operate differently than the general cameras that we have, like outside City Hall or outside the PAL Center, that are more like an area security camera. I'm sure the manager can provide the councilors with a list of those. I think that qualitatively these types of cameras are different. They operate differently and they're used for different purpose. And so if the council's inclined to move them on the budget, we'll have a focused discussion about the policy issues around this type of use, this type of technology. Councilor Cowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would recommend support moving this forward so that we can have that discussion. I think it's important, given comments we've heard here tonight, we're getting in emails and things, that we have that as more of a public debate and being able to have information that's accurate and can become available. So I just, in that spirit, I want to have that good discussion.
I agree with Councilor Cowan. I don't feel prepared to make an ideological decision today. That's just not what I personally want to do. I feel that the path forward still gives me ample opportunity to vote against this if that's what I so choose. But I have a lot of questions that we'll get into, so I would support moving this forward as well. Again, on the public record, with the understanding that I still have every ability to say no to this.
Yep, thank you. And Council Butler.
I just want to echo the same. I see this very much as the vehicle to open up public comment in a way that for some are feeling wasn't open previous, and that supporting that conversation is something I'd like to walk forward with.
Thank you. Further comments from the council on this item? Those that would like to move this into the budget, show of hands. And those opposed? Okay, we'll move this in the budget. The next item, so I'm assuming, my recommendation on this next item would be that we move this into the budget and have the discussion as we've had in prior years in the context when we get to the Public Works Department. And I think there's, for councilors that were on the council last time, probably have sufficient knowledge of this to make a decision, but the three new councilors are probably having no idea what the details of the proposal would be, what the impacts are from an operational standpoint or from a cost standpoint. And I think those are better had in the context of when we're looking at that department.
I'll say the same thing I just said. I think in the interest of debate and considering this, I support it. You know, we all have the right to say no to it down the road, but I don't feel comfortable shutting it down today.
Yeah. Other comments by the council? Those that want to move this in? Opposed? We'll move this in. Understand by moving this in, when the finance director and the city manager are updating the proposed budget, there will be no, at this point, there's no financial, there's no impact because we don't know what that is from the discussion yet. The next one, we'll move on to the non-municipal supplemental, LA Arts. I think the manager has explained this already. That's in the packet. I guess the question for the council is, do you want to move in whole or in part the 32.5 onto the budget?
I do in part. I wouldn't support that full amount. I think last year we cut them from 25 to 5. Is that correct?
Not exactly. The manager can explain. I think the big picture, there was a certain, we had accounted for the Historical Society and LA Arts, things like that in a single line. There was some confusion over that. A total amount was sent to LA Arts that wasn't exactly what the intent of the council was. So I think it's true to say it was cut, but I think from an actual budget standpoint last year, my recollection, and the finance director may remember this, I believe the actual cut was 10 down to 5.
Last year.
Last year.
Well, the current budget that we are in, the last year's fiscal,
Right.
yes, was from 10 to 5.
At any point prior to that, was it higher?
Yes.
That's what I'm remembering.
Yeah.
Well,
Looking at that.
Yeah, it was like 10,000, I think, the year before that, and then it was reduced to 5. We split the 10,000 between Historical Society and LA Arts.
then in that spirit, I do believe that budget money should be included for LA Arts. I think 32.5, even though it might sound great now, we're going to find ourselves in a very difficult position over the next month, and I don't think we're going to stick with that number. So, do you want me to say a number or just say that in theory,
Yeah,
I
well,
would support?
we need a number if we're moving it in so that.
So I'd
staff
start with
can-
15, and my guess is we may have to go lower for LA Arts.
An additional 15?
No, 30, strike 32.5 to 15.
So the total, there's 5 on the budget now.
Sorry,
Current.
10. 15 total is what I'd like to see.
So,
5 plus
so your proposal is to strike the 32.5 and move an additional 10 onto the budget? Which would be 15 total for the.
And that's in line with they've historically gotten, correct?
So FY '25, it was 25,000 to LA Arts. Last year, it went to 5.
Okay, so it was 25. I'm sorry, I thought I just heard it was 10.
I thought it was 10. That's what Kelsey just brought it up. It was 25,000.
Okay, then I amend my comment. I'd like to see this number go from 32.5 to 20. So
Okay.
5 plus 20
Yep.
gets them to their historical number. Of course, we can shape, we'll have that debate about, but I don't think going over the historical number in a year like this makes a lot of sense.
Council Walker?
Yes, does any of that money help at our LA Art over here?
Yes, yeah, it should be in your document, but yes, it does cover, part of their funding request would be to get towards age-friendly. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah.
Side note, in FY '24, it was 10,000, so it's kind of been all over the map when we're talking about historical amounts. So FY '24, it was 10,000 total. FY '25, it was 25,000 total. FY '26, it was 5,000 total. So it's been very.
Yeah, and the 25,000 wasn't what the council intended. I remember we had a detailed discussion about this last year, and 2 items got added together. So I think it was supposed to be higher than the 10, but it wasn't supposed to be 25.
I guess maybe I'd like to hear what other people think.
Whatever number the council wants to move on is fine. We're going to have a thorough discussion about it.
I'd like to recommend 10,000 if I could, not 10,000 total.
Meaning move 5,000, an additional 5 instead of 20?
Yes, that's what I recommend.
Any other comments? Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A lot of the stuff that LA Arts does, I'd like to see the that what Counselor Walker wants, the walks and the tours and stuff. But right now, most all the bulk of the events LA Arts puts on is in Lewiston. And so if we're going to give them money, I want to see stuff on this side. But I'm not willing at this point to give them 10. Given that, you had said there's two different things. You're also talking about over to the historic buildings, over by the Esplanade. I think you made some mention of that.
So you have 5,000 that's currently allocated in the budget that I proposed for the Historical Society. If you recall, maybe 3 years ago, the Historical Society asked for a certain amount one time. And we had the conversation that rather than a one-time amount, why don't we put an annual amount for sustainability for the Historical Society? So we budgeted 5,000 for the Historical Society. And that's it's carried. So there's 5,000 that's already built into the budget for the Historical Society.
Because I know that the Historic Society, they moved to a building in Lewiston, which is okay in my mind because they're preserving Auburn's historic documents and everything else, which is great. But also, I'm not sure what we as a city's obligation to those two buildings over by the Esplanade.
So we won't have a discussion of the Historical Society tonight. It's not in front of us on the supplemental consideration. It's already in the proposed budget. So when we get to that section of the budget, we can have a thorough discussion about what the appropriate funding level is for the Historical Society. The issue right now is, are there any other comments? You know, what's been suggested is moving an additional 5 or an additional 20 on, excuse me.
I mean, now hearing what what I want to say is I'd like the number to be the average of the last 4 years. Rather than going up and down every year, I want to figure out the fair number.
Which would basically be 10.
Can I just recommend that we carry over an LA Arts amount into the budget for discussions? And then we will work that up. Yep.
At what level?
We'll get the average of the last few years and put a number in there.
Okay, so you're going to...
The council can raise it or lower it, however you want.
We're going to do the average of the last, how many fiscal years?
I said 4, but it could
4, and when you do that, you need to research the 25,000 and back out if some of that was double counted from a different budget line that they got. Is like frosting on the cake. So with that, with the average, what is, Council Walker, did you have further?
Well, the reason I was saying that I wanted to see 10 is because last year, I know the Boys and Girls Club wanted to get in, and they were not able to get in, and I was going to recommend at least 5,000 to them this year, because I know they need some money and some help.
Okay, so if we do the average, it will be at least an additional 5,000. So with that, those that are in favor of moving it in? Opposed? So we'll move in and you'll calculate the average and then report back what that is and what budget adjustment you made. Haley Hugs is, as the manager said, is a nonprofit. They provide assistance, financial assistance to families who have children with cancer. Any thoughts on this?
My only question, I guess I pose it to the count or anybody, it's an insignificant amount of money. It's $100. But does it set a terrible precedent that do we do this often, giving $100 to anyone who asks?
So typically, we don't do these.
No.
And this is actually a relatively short list. Usually we get, 5, 6, 8 similar to this. And at least in the 2 years I've been on the council, as a general practice, they haven't been funded.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just say what, I don't know, maybe no one wants to say, but I wouldn't push this forward. I think if there's a group of counselors that is interested in supporting this cause, maybe we can band together and make a personal private donation for $100. But it just seems a little dirty to me to be doing this through the municipal budget.
Other questions? Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For that little amount, I would say put it in because we don't know what the backdrop is. They may need to show that they've got municipal support in order to pull down other types of funds.
That's not the case here. They would have laid that out in their application or in their request letter. Councilor Cowan, did you have something for this?
I just was going to say I agree with Councilor Platts. I think this creates a precedent that I don't think we want to go down with future budgets.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, if I could just, I want to, as I go back through history and think through things that we've done, the only other nonprofit request that we would get is that years ago, your CDBG fund had a 20% for nonprofit organizations. And so Head Start, the Sexual Assault Crisis Center, domestic violence, programs that provided services within the community were funded under CDBG. CDBG rules changed. Those funds were never, social service programming is what the allocation was. CDBG funding changed. You can no longer allocate those funds, that 20% towards those. And so that's when funding from any municipal budget shifted away from a nonprofit, except for during allocations within the ARPA grant, because there were some requests that came in, whether it be Special Olympics, Grandstand, EL's Grandstand. There were a few others that came in that way, and they went before the council as a one-time because of these funds that came in and because of the impact of COVID, those monies were allocated. That's it. I would be really concerned if you opened up this. We would have a lot of nonprofits that don't necessarily provide direct services in the community would submit requests.
Anything further from the council on this one? Those that want to move it in? So this is not being moved in. The next one's the drop-in center. They're requesting $43,000. As you, I would caution that I would think of this as a total of $43,000. If you read their letter, they've identified a means to do that. I think it's fair to say neither the manager or I would recommend the forbearance of rent issue. That will cause all kinds of problems with other tenants. I would just look at this as a $43,000 request, the basis of which is they want to expand to a third day of services at the drop-in center. So thoughts or questions about this from the council? Council Platt?
Like the other items, I'm happy to move it forward in the interest of discussion. But I really need to understand what is 43,000 as a percentage of their budget. What have they raised from the private community before asking municipalities for money? I'm happy to move it forward, but I would be very hesitant to approve that number without a full understanding of what it is. And I would need to see that that's a small percentage of what they've gone out and fundraised elsewhere, because ultimately, as we move forward in the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, to solve this problem, that we're dealing with, it's going to take a ton of private support. It can't just fall on the shoulders of municipalities. Sure. So that's where I stand. I'll move it forward. Happy to.
Other comments from the council? Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support their cause. I support what they're trying to do. But the thing is, they're providing a service. We're providing the space. We're providing all the heat, electricity, and stuff. We've gone out and done stuff.
That's not correct. So they're currently paying $18,000 a year in rent, and along, as you've heard Mr. Holmes on numerous occasions point out that the idea with that facility is that there's a number of service organizations, including the drop-in center, that are paying rent for the space there. And with the city's portion, if you think, we have Mr. Holmes' organization is down there, that is to offset the operational cost of the building. I wouldn't want to characterize that they're getting any special consideration that we wouldn't give to any other organization that would be providing those types of services. Their request here is not, well, they took the approach of trying to be creative by saying 18,000 of this 43,000 could be offset of rent. That doesn't really work from a policy standpoint, but their ask is for the city to contribute to their operational cost to provide the actual services.
I would just add, especially keeping these separate is going to be really important, because we have yet to have a year of revenue coming in for that facility. That's not accounted for in your revenue line item budget at this time, because we need to know where we were going to be with rents and what that was going to look like. Nonprofits change over pretty frequently. Sometimes I think we've already had one signed agreement that's already left the agreement before they moved in. So we want to make sure that we really have a good, solid, fixed number. So there's no revenue currently within your budget to demonstrate the rent that's coming in for that facility. We'll work that in for the FY28 budget.
Council Platt?
Do we have the fixed line item from last year? It was like 180,000 for homeless services. Is that?
Yeah,
I know it's unrelated to this,
yeah,
but but they are kind of related.
Yeah. So we do. The services that the drop-in center provides are not within the scope of that. We'll when we get to that line item, from a departmental standpoint, we'll talk about what the mix of those are. Does not include any funding for the drop-in center.
I'm just more trying to wrap around my head as a municipality, what's the total dollar amount that we are diverting towards, that cause? But
yeah, so I think that's a good point, and I think fundamentally you could take that line item, and if the council decides to add any of this to the mix, you could add those two together to understand what that would be. Council Cowan.
I certainly support moving this forward, again, for the opportunity for you all to learn about what's happening there, not only with the drop-in center, but down at 121 Mill. That's one of multiple services, right? So just understanding updates on that, I think, could be a value for us to understand. And then how, whether or not any of these dollars that they're requesting we want to put forward. There's been tremendous increase in their demand. So hearing from them and the details about that so you can make a weighed decision, for that reason, I encourage us to move this forward.
Councilor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like I said, I wholeheartedly support the concept and the drop-in center and the good that they're doing for the community and the people that go there. I mean, we've got lots of people that I've recently met that go there. Is there capacity to grant their request to have another day?
Yes.
I mean, an additional day. So that's good if you say yes.
Well, facility-wise, yes. They would need to then do everything
Figure out
they
the
do
finances.
how they provide that, their staffing of that. But facility-wise, yes, there is that capacity.
Councilor Duval.
Yeah, I think I agree with some of my other fellow councilors, and then I think we should have this discussion and bring it forward.
Those that want to move this forward? Okay, we'll move this in, and then I think, Mr. Manager, if you can have a discussion with the folks at the drop-in center, I think when they come before us, the type of information they ordinarily wouldn't bring is some of the information Councilor Platts is asking for about what's their budget, both from donations, in-kind services, and what would it take to move from that to 3 days, and then if they did that, what percentage of this would be? Because typically, I think Councilor Cowan and I have been in a number of presentations they've had. That typically isn't information that they would bring.
And I would say that I don't think any of us need to be convinced that they're doing good work. It's really just a financial discussion.
Right. And the last item on the list is Life Flight. Life Flight makes request of all communities in their service area to to help offset the cost of providing the services that they have. Any comments on this?
I'd support bringing this forward for discussion.
Any other comments? Those that want to move this in? The opposed? So this will be moved in as well. Okay, so I think that's it for the workshop tonight. There's been some questions about what will be on the schedule. The manager will let the council know as we go along in advance what areas of the budget we're going to be discussing as we work through the various workshops. So with that, we'll move back to complete the council agenda, and the only remaining item is an executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 405, Sub 6C, to discuss an economic development matter pertaining to the disposition of city-owned property where premature disclosures of the information would prejudice the competitive or bargaining position of the body or agency. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
Motion to move.
Moved by Councilor Walker, seconded by Councilor Cowan. All those in favor? Council will be in executive session.